Hello and welcome to Epic Flail 40k Tactics. My name's Luke, and this week I will be mostly talking about Adepta Sororitas, or Sisters of Battle. This week's video is going to be a bit different. I've picked up a new faction, and I want to share some of the learning through that process. If you're someone who is thinking about starting a new faction, but a bit unsure about some ways to go about this, maybe my experiences can help point you in the right direction. Sisters of Battle is clearly doing very well in the meta at the moment, but it's also worth noting that I've actually had a Sisters of Battle army for years, just in a very incomplete state. I'd painted a bunch of rhinos and exorcist and an immolator, but I hadn't really progressed anything more than that. I've got Morven Val, I've got a few battle sisters, bits and pieces, but I never actually played a game properly with the army. But there is a regular player who plays at the club that runs sisters, so I'd had plenty of experience playing against them, and I'd done a bit of homework on the faction, watched a bit of content, found out a few things, and this is the sort of stuff that I found really quite helpful to begin with. If I can recommend anything, it would be to not just dive in with both feet and buy a bunch of stuff. It would be to do a bit of homework beforehand. So play against the faction if that's an option to you. If you quite like the look of a certain army, then try and arrange games against an opponent with that army to try and learn as much as you can about how it plays and ask people questions that play the army. That's something I found really useful. It helps to paint a picture of how the army works, rather than me piecing together my idea of what I thought the army would be like, and running the risk of being disappointed if it doesn't meet your expectations. And this is really early stage stuff, before you've even bought a box of miniatures. And I know it's really tempting, especially if you find yourself walking into your local game store, and before you know it, you spend far too much money and you're leaving with a brand new army. Do some groundwork first. We spend a lot of time and money on this hobby, and it does sadden me a little bit when I see people buy stuff on a whim. They put quite a lot of time into stuff and then end up just selling it because it doesn't actually scratch the itch that they were hoping, or they don't like it. They didn't really think about whether or not it was the right army for them. We could end up playing this game a lot, so we've got to love the army, otherwise we're not going to even get it out of the box. As I say, I've collected sisters before, and I knew I wanted a Sisters of Battle army. I just love the aesthetic. So the counter to what I've been saying there is I really just love the miniatures, and whether or not I enjoyed playing with them, it wasn't going to put me off buying the models, which for many people, that's why they love the game, and that's what they're going to do. They see an army they like the look of, they're going to get that army because they like the look of it, irrespective of how it plays and how strong it is, how good it is, and that's totally cool. And that's actually, even though I give that advice about doing a bit of homework on the army beforehand, I actually did the opposite of that in the very first sisters stuff that I brought, because I just thought they were cool and I've wanted them for a long time. The new range came out, and so I bought some stuff. So that's how long it's been since I first started collecting Sisters of Battle stuff, was when the range got released. I bought the box set and slowly started building it up, but I've never actually got them on the table and played a game with them. But then I wanted to attend LGT. It's coming up very soon. By the time this video goes out, it might already be happening, and I wanted to bring something really potent. I didn't feel like with the factions I play I have a lot of great options. I could obviously just throw something together, but I know that in my heart of hearts I wouldn't be happy going to the biggest tournament in the UK and taking something that's not very optimized, not very well thought out. I haven't had a lot of time recently to work on any army lists, so I wanted something that was potent and powerful. So my friend that has the Sisters of Battle army that they play regularly offered to lend them out to me, and so I took them up on that, because that helped massively with the idea of even writing a list, because I don't know where to begin with the faction, what I would choose myself, because I haven't had any experience with the army at that point. It was a case of they basically wrote a list for me, and I've been playing and practicing with that, which is a fantastic way to start. And not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone's able to have models lend out to them, obviously. So we can proxy things. We can have games where we proxy things, or use Tabletop Simulator, which is an excellent resource to get those games in before you start assembling an army. So with your proxies, or on TTS, or if you're having stuff lent out to you, have some games, see how it feels, and that will help to shape your first initial purchases as well. These early practice games help you to figure out the kind of things you want in your list. So I managed to have some practice games with the person whose army I borrowed, and essentially playing someone who has a familiarity with the faction is really useful, because they were able to basically tell me the combos or the synergies that I might have been otherwise slow to process or just miss entirely. And my friend was basically saying, oh, you want to make sure you're doing this, and this is how far you can move, and this will basically mean that I can or can't do this. And that was really useful, because being unfamiliar with the army, I was just trying to learn the basics, learn the data sheets. It was very helpful to have that guidance through that first game, so that I was able to build some, as cheesy as it sounds, but muscle memory, and actually just memorize the data sheets. And there's one thing to read them. I recommend reading them before you play a game if you're not familiar with your own data sheets, but I always forget the odd value. The common ones that I tend to forget are leadership or OC. And then any number of practice games that you can have will of course help to layer that. The next one that I did, it was less about, right, you telling me what the army can do and how to go through the turns, and actually me playing a game and then just telling me all the stuff that I've missed or what I could have done instead of what I did, or how the sequencing was poor, was the deployment rubbish, all that good stuff, so that I can then learn from those mistakes. Because you reach a point where you need to learn from your mistakes. I feel like with anything really, it's one thing to be shown how to do something, but actually practicing something and the act of getting it wrong is often far more useful and impactful than being told or shown something. And that's really useful, is not being afraid to just get it wrong. And that was something I actually made a point of saying in that second practice game with my buddy, was I don't want you to help me. Obviously, if I'm doing something silly like walking into a reactive move that you have in your army, then yeah, let's have a friendly play by intent, regular, sensible game. But don't just point out all of the inefficiencies I'm doing as I'm doing them. This second game, I want to just play the army, and then you give me the feedback of what you would have done, or if there was something overtly wrong, etc. And then I can learn from that. So that was really useful. And to seek feedback, reflection and self-evaluation is really useful, but it will always be somewhat limited. And it's a great first step, but then also having someone there to say, oh, I made that play earlier, would you have done that? Do you think that impacted the game? Or this is a new faction and I'm still learning it. Did you spot any mistakes? Or would you have done anything different? After those two practice games, I then had a bit of a baptism of fire and went to an RTT, and there was a bunch of us that went down. And if you want to see some of the guys from Epic Flail, then check out Epic Flail HQ. There's a weekly live stream where we chat about the latest happenings in the 40k and wargaming community at large. And if you become a member, you'll get access to members only content, some of which are extra tactics videos that I make, as well as some after dark shows, gaming, all sorts of stuff. And coming up very soon, we're going to be streaming UKTC Coventry, so have a little look. There is all sorts going on at Epic Flail HQ, and for $2.99 a month you get a massive amount of extra content. And not only that, you get access to our members only Discord. After those two practice games, I then had a bit of a baptism of fire and went to an RTT in Portsmouth Way, Hobby Henchmen. Put a link to them in the description. You should definitely check them out if you're at least somewhat local. They had UKTC terrain, which they are optimizing for their next tournament, so they're listening to community feedback already and putting on a great event. It was really well organised, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park for their first event. It was a great bunch of people. I played against 3 awesome opponents, and I ended up going 3-0, very much to my surprise. I was very much using this, again, as practice, but in a competitive environment, to try and get some of the fundamentals of the army down, just learn some things, and I wasn't expecting to do very well at all, really. And the first game was a bit of a struggle. Played against a very heavy Chaos Space Marine vehicle list, so it was very much a case of we each have lots of very shooty vehicles. He played it very cleverly, keeping some Vindicators in reserve, so he'd always be able to get the drop on something with them. It was a great fun game, each of us just blasting tanks, having a merry old time. Second game I played against Custodes, and even though I lost a lot of stuff, they just don't have many units, and once I killed all the chaff, I was able to just limit all the places they could be, and I think the attrition hurt them. And then the last game I played against Grey Knights, and it was one of the cagiest games I've played, where because of all of my reactive moves, all of their reactive moves, they're uppy downy, and both of us have quite reasonable potent shooting as well. None of us were really trying to expose too much. Ended up sort of dancing around each other for a little while, but in the end I was able to start picking off Dread Knights and do the damage. And then the last game I played the other week, I lost playing against Votan. Really interesting game, very scrappy, and lots of back and forth, seeing opportunities in the game that I played with how I could move units. So again, that reflection and seeking feedback from my opponent about things that I could have maybe done differently, all very, very useful. So I'm at a point now where I'm very set on what I'm taking to LGT. Had a few practice games, and it's reawoken some of the passion for actually painting this army that has been sat unpainted for quite a few years now. And if you're thinking of starting a new faction, hopefully there's been some things that I've shared with you on this initial foray into it that will be of some use. If you're interested in even more content, then check out my latest video, which focuses on some of the key things that I do to help improve my scoring. In the meantime, that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching. Keep rolling those dice, and stay tuned for more.